Hi, my name's John Cordy, and when I was sort of in my early 20s, maybe 23, I went to work in a supermarket, and I spent a lot of time stood up in a petrol station, and after a while I experienced some pain in my big toe, and this had been happening for a while, and I was thinking, well, this doesn't seem right. It was like fizzy feeling and, you know, like a pins and needles feeling. So I said to my mum, I think I'm going to go to the walk-in centre. In the UK, we have these things called the NHS walk-in centre, and you go in there, you know, for all sorts of things. I mean, mainly STIs, but all sorts of things. You know, potentially you could have gonorrhea, you could, you know, all sorts of things. You could have maybe herpes, but you can literally go there for any reason. And so I went in there and I walked into the room. There's a large waiting area, and a lot of the people there looked like they hadn't really seen a chair before. And then eventually a guy said, "John Cordy," and they called me in, and I was there with my mum, and he said, "What seems to be the problem, John?" I said, "It's chlamydia." That's a true story. Anyway, right, so I wanted to do a little video today. So you might have seen some bits and pieces on the channel about the old quad cortex thing, which arrived at the end of last week. So I've been doing some videos and demos and just checking it out. This video is not supposed to be like a dunking on the Helix or dunking on the quad cortex or whatever. It's just talking about some things. When it comes to the Helix, it's been out for a long time, and there's been a lot of time to develop the things that it can do, and there's a very, very long list of things that it can do. And so to go through this, for instance, in the same way that I've done on the quad cortex, and kind of talk through all of the possibilities. So, you know, just in terms of fuzz pedals compared to the quad cortex, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 fuzzes and some legacy fuzzes as well. Versus in the quad cortex at the moment, there's only one fuzz. So, you know, that's not trying to say anything's better or anything like that. I was just talking about what's available in terms of choice. And, you know, the same is true of pretty much most of the kind of delays, reverbs, and all that sort of stuff, and the pitches and synths, the filters. You do have a lot of options within the Helix. So instead of doing a video where I'm saying, oh, look at all of this stuff that the Helix can do, I wanted to do something which is actually going to end up being a shorter video, because it turns out you can do pretty much anything you want with the Helix. But we'll just talk about some of the things that it can't do necessarily. So one of the most obvious things is that it can't do profiling or capturing like a Kemper or a quad cortex. Now, this for me is not necessarily a huge deal. I don't spend loads of time profiling or capturing, but profiling and capturing does turn out to be a fairly quick way to get the same result. So for instance, I captured my lead preset from the Helix on the quad cortex, and it's, you know, comparatively quicker than trying to find the right IR, trying to find the right amp that's going to do the right thing and with the right drive pedal and set high cuts and stuff. It can be quicker just to profile the things. Similarly, if I had like a Fender Champ that I was trying to dial in or get a tone, sometimes it could be quicker to just get a Kemper profile of it. Now, obviously that profile in the end would probably be a little bit less flexible than the Helix, which is effectively profiling from the inside out, is the way that they like to talk about it. You know, they're going in like Fractal are, and they're building circuits from a component kind of level, and that's kind of the way they're doing things. One other kind of key area at the moment is that you can't really set the axis position of the cab. So you can set the distance from the speaker, so you can have it as low as 1 inch and as far as 12, so between 1 inch and a foot. And you can set the early reflections, so this is, I guess it's going to kind of set up reflections from the space that the speaker is in. And you can set up high cuts and low cuts, but what you can't do is like move the microphone off of the center of the cone or whatever position it was actually recorded. I don't know whether they record off axis or on axis or whatever, but you can't change that mic position with the Helix at the moment. You can do that on the quad cortex. On the Fractal stuff now, they just have gone fully down the IR route, which is also potentially an option. Third-party IR companies, some of them will tell you that this is an off-axis or this is whatever, but you don't have the same kind of range of choices like you generally do with a modeled type solution. But that's one thing that the Helix cannot really do at the moment, is change the mic position on or off axis. And I think that is something that some people would probably like, but it can be remedied by just using third-party cabs if that's what you're into. I guess it's worth talking about the limitations of the looper at the moment. I say limitations relative to what? So relative to maybe the headrush looper. One of the cool things that the headrush looper can do is that you can record a short loop and then you can loop over that as many times as you want. So you could say, right, I'm going to record a bar of like a drum type groove or a rhythm type groove, and then you can tell it to repeat that 4 times, and then you record again over that. That's not something that's possible with the Helix at the moment. And at the moment, the Helix loop length is relatively short. It's certainly usable for me because I don't tend to do like whole verse and chorus type loops or whole songs. And also you can't save loops, but those are some limitations that might be worth knowing for individuals who are really into looping. But I'm going to assume that if you're really into looping, you probably do some of that outside of your modeler anyway. Something like an Eros looper or a Boss RC500 or whatever. For me, the looper in the Helix does pretty much everything I want it to do, except for the thing that the new Ditto does and that the Headrush could do, which was where you can take that initial loop and just repeat that 4 times and loop over that. I think that's a really interesting feature and can be quite useful, especially for staying in time and those sorts of things. One other thing that the Helix doesn't do in the way that some other modelers can do, so for instance the Plex delay block in the fractal stuff is super powerful, and what that does is you can have like up to 8 delay lines and you can set the diffusion to them and all that sort of stuff. I don't think that's possible in the Helix at the moment. I say that, I didn't think that was possible in the Helix at the moment, and I've just seen that there's a multi-tap delay with diffusion. And as I say that, I've just opened up the multi-tap, and in the multi-tap 4 you have a diffusion setting, so I wonder if that could maybe be something worth checking out. So I'm going to do something with that maybe for the intro of this video. But in the fractal world there's some really cool delays where you have super powerful, and you can do like shifts of different delay taps up, and you can change the diffusion of each individual delay tap. I don't know if that's something that potentially the folks at Line 6 might eventually do, but that's at the moment something which I think it can't do quite as well as the fractal stuff, I think. But this might be worth checking out, the multi-tap 4, because I've got diffusion setting there and delays. So that could be super powerful. I'm going to check that out for sure. The other thing that the Helix can't do at the moment that some other things can do, so like the Boss GT1000 stuff, effectively you can switch drives in snapshots. You could have like one of them might be like a tube screamer, and then you could change to a different snapshot, or I think it's called the matrix, a sign matrix I think they call it in the Boss GT1000 world, and you could change that to be a metal zone or whatever for another preset. Now you can do this in other ways with the Helix. Obviously you've generally got space for quite a few drive blocks, but in like the Stomp it might be useful, that kind of thing, because you're limited to 8 blocks. Maybe if between snapshots you could change that on one you had a tube screamer, on the other one you had a fuzz pedal. That might be potentially useful for some people in the same way that it is in the GT1000 world. In the fractal world as well, you've got channels and scenes, so you can have up to 4 different options within every block, and that's really kind of interesting. So you can have one preset and one amp block, but you can have across the different scenes, you can have it being a Vibrolux, you could have it being a John Petrucci Mezza Boogie, you can have it being a Trainwreck amp, and then you've got one other option as well. I think that's super powerful. Not sure how they do it, but to me that's a really interesting thing. That's something that's not available in the Helix at the moment, and is kind of an interesting thing from other modelers. That's kind of some of the things that I've thought of that the Helix can't necessarily do at the moment. Are there any that you can think of that you'd like? As I say, this is coming from the point of there's so much that the Helix can do that I figured it'd be a shorter list if I went this way than trying to highlight all of the things that it can do, and could potentially open up a conversation about things that people are wanting. I think firmware 3.0, for instance, brought across the poly pitch shifting stuff, which was one of the kind of last things I think that the people were saying that the Helix couldn't really do, and maybe some people are talking about drip reverbs and things, but for me it's a super powerful unit, and I can't really think of anything except for maybe the fractal stuff that can do all of the stuff that the Helix can do, and even like an FM3 can't do the multi signal chain thing with dual amps and that kind of thing. So I think the Helix is super powerful still. But yeah, let me know in the comments if you can think of other things. Now I'm going to go and check out that multi-tap, because that's new to me. Delay with multi-taps with a diffusion on it. So let's see how that sounds. That'll be in the intro. If you want these presets that I'm going to use in the intro, they'll be in the description. Thank you for stopping by, and I'll catch you in another video soon. Cheers!